All right, hello everybody. I am Drew Duncan, and this is the Sync 57 Sports Show, where sports lives 365/7. Don't forget that we are wherever you're listening to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play Drew Duncan Sync 57 Sports on iHeart, iTunes, Spreaker, Deezer, etc., etc. We are just about everywhere you are listening to podcasts. All right, plenty to get to today. Obviously, we're going to be talking college football playoff, recap from the games over the weekend, why I felt the way that I did about the games going into this weekend, and how I feel about the games going into the CFP. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Deion Sanders making the move to Colorado. What does it mean for the Buffs right now at this point? I'm going to touch on some points that I had made before about Deion Sanders going over to Colorado when it was a potential at that juncture. Additionally, we're going to be talking about the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. And of course, the Tennessee Titans get uprooted by the Philadelphia Eagles. We're going to be discussing that game as well and its significance. So plenty to get to. Let's dive right into it. All right, everybody. CFP. Going into this weekend, the two games that I thought would turn out the way that they did were TCU and Kansas State, USC and Utah. And of course, with USC losing, we all knew that that kept the door open for Ohio State and even potentially Alabama, depending on how the committee viewed the TCU Kansas State game, as well as what could have potentially happened with Michigan and Purdue in the Big Ten championship game. Look, I didn't feel that USC could beat Utah. Not because it was a rematch situation and Utah had already come back huge in the previous football game against USC. It was because I really don't trust Lincoln Riley and his coaching in these situations. You look at what's happened in the CFP in the past when he's coached the Oklahoma Sooners, and it was just disastrous, to say the least. So I look at Lincoln Riley and I think to myself, do I trust him in big game situations? And right now, I most certainly do not. Of course, USC, as we all know, is going to be making the move to the Big Ten. That is being represented times two in the CFP, currently the first conference outside of the SEC to have multiple teams in the CFP. How much more successful could he potentially be over there than he would be in the Pac-12? I think that the USC Trojans had the golden ticket, so to speak, hanging around in the Pac-12. I've always said that since the allegations and everything from the Trojans came out back from when they were successful, from what was it, basically 03 to 07, that the Pac-12 wasn't good and wide open, and nobody really popped up and showed continuous dominance in the Pac-12. And so I feel like them being there always gave them a better opportunity to do well and to have a better chance to play in the CFP as a Pac-12 conference champion, even with one loss. Going to the Big Ten, I just don't think is going to work out for Lincoln Riley and company. I think there's going to be too much traveling from California to play football in the Midwest and up north. You know, you're talking about teams like Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Illinois. Indiana's shown improvement over the last couple of seasons. You got teams like Purdue that have done fairly well over the last couple of seasons. So when I look at the Big Ten, I think to myself, is USC going to be even more successful now than they have been in the Pac-12? It's a resounding no. Again, we saw Oregon, Utah both get dominated by SEC teams this season. Imagine what it's going to be like just trying to play against Big Ten competition. So I don't think it's going to vote well for them. That's why I didn't think Utah had a chance. I think Risen is a good quarterback, one of the more underrated quarterbacks in all of college football. And I didn't think that Caleb Williams, quarterback for the Trojans, should have been a Heisman winner. Now, contender, yes, but I just believe that Deuce Vaughn is the best player in college football. And this is a guy who's not a Kansas State fan at all. Matter of fact, I'm not really a fan of anybody out of the Big 12. I'm a Syracuse guy, but regardless of all that, I think the Big 12 has the best player, and I think that Kansas State has the best player in the country in Deuce Vaughn at running back. There's nothing that he can't do. He blocks, he runs, he's got great movement with his body. He understands how to use his body and perfect body control. He's very good with receiving. He's an incredibly intelligent football player. So I think the best player is Deuce Vaughn, and Kansas State beat TCU. And I felt that TCU is a football team that's been vulnerable all season long. I know a lot of people were going to look to that OU game as kind of being the headline for the Horned Frogs this season, but I really don't think so. I think the Kansas State game, to me, at the towards the middle of the year, was the headline for TCU. Yes, they were down. Yes, they ended up winning that football game, but we're talking about a backup quarterback at Kansas State. And I understand that the best player is Deuce Vaughn, but he's one guy on a very mediocre football team. And I made mention that history repeats itself. I had talked about years ago when Kansas State dominated OU, and OU still got a chance in the then BCS, and they didn't do anything. And I don't anticipate that TCU will do much in the CFP. I really don't. I think that they've been an overrated football team all year long, but that kind of leads into so many people upset with Ohio State not getting or getting in, I should say. TCU getting in after losing the Big 12 championship game. Look, who else are you going to put in there right now? There have been suggestions out there that only conference champions should get in. Okay, do you think Kansas State is going to compete with Georgia, let alone TCU? Do you think Clemson's going to compete with Georgia, let alone TCU? What about Utah? Do you really believe they're going to compete with Georgia? Come on. Let's just be honest here for a sec. There's really nobody else out there. And I got to tell you, I think the committee was very tempted to slide in Alabama, even with their 2 losses, including to a Tennessee team that they don't have ranked above them, even though they have the head-to-head. Alabama with their quality losses or whatever it is that they've got all the time. Look, the fact of the matter is this. The CFP this season has been done right. Whether we like it or not, it has been done right. TCU, despite what I feel about them, has earned the right to play in the college football playoff. But you can't live on the edge. I've talked about it before, almost ad nauseum. Eventually it catches up to you, and I think it catches up to them in the CFP. Ohio State, I've always said from the outset, with that offense, I think they have the best opportunity to take on Georgia, and we're going to find out about them real quick. And look, if I'm Michigan and I'm TCU, I am hoping that Ohio State beats Georgia, because my best chance to win is against Ohio State. It is not against Georgia, especially TCU. Ohio State has had some very difficult football games where they haven't looked their best, okay? And they've got off to some late starts. So is Georgia. Obviously, the Kentucky game was a huge one. The Georgia Tech game, obviously a game that you can look at for some weaknesses to UGA. But I just feel like overall with Stetson and company, they have the best offense in college football, and I feel that they have the best defense in college football. And when all is said and done, I think that Georgia ends up taking it all. Now, again, I do believe that Ohio State has the best opportunity. The key for Stroud at quarterback for Ohio State is going to be taking care of the football. You can't afford to make any mistakes against Georgia. You just can't. Even if it's a day where your defense shows up, all it takes is one fumble, one interception, one missed throw on a key third down, and next thing you know, you've got Georgia in good field position, and they don't need a whole lot of room to score. They just have too many different types of players and too many different types of way to score the ball. So when all is said and done, I do believe that Georgia beats Ohio State, but it could be close. Now, as far as TCU and Michigan goes, Michigan should run that game running away. Max Duggan, we've seen him in some games where he literally just throws the football up. A lot of people are going to be talking about him going into the CFP, but we've seen him in situations where he just, gets jittery back there, and he force feeds a lot of plays and takes a lot of unnecessary risks. And so I'm not really sure if I trust him against the Michigan defense. Again, I've talked about it all year long that Michigan's defense is a championship caliber defense. And I think that they should have no problem with TCU, even if they win a low-scoring game, 13-3, 16-3, somewhere in that neighborhood. They should still win that game, what I would call running away, even in a low-scoring game like that. I think that they've got enough with the run game and Edwards and company that they could run the football on TCU. Even though we've seen TCU win some low-scoring games, i.e. the Texas game, I don't trust them defensively enough at this point to get the job done. I still believe that Michigan is a one-trick pony offensively. I don't believe that McCarthy has it in him to get it done. I know a lot of people love to talk about that Ohio State game, but he only completed 50% of his balls. He just happened to have some wide open guys, and he hit some big plays, and TCU is not going to blitz like that. They're not. They're not going to send the house and then not have a safety back there to defend. Okay? So that blueprint, thanks to Ohio State, has been created by any team that Michigan is going to face now. So I think with Edwards and company, they could still run the football against TCU. And I think that they should be able to win that game, even if it's a low-scoring one. And I do like Georgia. And then, of course, if Georgia wins over Ohio State, we'll see Georgia and Michigan for the college football playoff. And I think it's a repeat of last season. I just think Georgia's too good. So ultimately, I do think that Georgia ends up winning. All right. On to Deion Sanders going to Colorado. Boy, you want to talk about a football team that's just been no good. One of the things that I talked about was this is not the same team that we saw with Cordell Stewart back in the mid-90s. This is not that same football team. It's not even close to that. They're in a bad situation. They've been in a horrific situation ever since they got hit with NCAA violations for their recruiting and recruiting practices and alleged payout to players, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, they went from the Big 12 to the Pac-12. That move proved to do nothing for them. They weren't doing anything in the Big 12 at that juncture anyway. And so this move for them is definitely a power play move. Basically, what they are relying on is the clout of Deion Sanders to help bring in NIL deals for good football players to come to their school. That's literally the gist of it. I'm not saying Deion Sanders isn't a good football coach. What I am saying is this is a football team that has not been able to find a coach for years and years and years. They've had to fire guys because they've gotten worse. Nobody ever seems to really show any improvement at Colorado. They have one of the best locations to me in college football because to me it makes sense that they're in the Pac-12 given the time difference in Colorado. It makes sense that they would play teams out there like Utah and other California teams, even though they are a Midwest football team, because of the time difference. It ends up working out. So the traveling doesn't really hurt any of the players in terms of jet lag or any of that. Boulder, though, is a boring place. Don't get offended, Colorado fan, but it is. All right. And it's also a very cold place. So the recruiting is difficult now because, you know, you've got to explain to a kid why he should want to be in 10-degree weather in the middle of January with the wind blowing and ice and snow everywhere. You're going to have to make that look attractive, and you're going to have to be honest about the weather out there. And 18-year-old kids now with NIL deals get to go hang out in sunny California, beaches and people everywhere, and a lot of things to do and a lot of places to go to kick it and hang out, and a lot of financial opportunities. It's more than just car dealerships. It's true financial opportunities out there. There's a lot of money flowing around in the state of California, and a lot of people are willing to shell out that dough. So you got to ask yourself, what's the better opportunity? So they are relying on the clout to get the players in there. And then from there, they are relying on, okay, Deion Sanders, once he's got his guys, they're good players. And please stop with this news about how players are decommitting from Jackson State with Deion no longer there. It's a common thing. It happens all the time. People leave with their coaches. Go look at what happened with Lincoln Riley and OU. People leave with their coaches. It's okay. They do that. People decommit when the coach isn't going to be there anymore. It's okay. I've talked to numerous coaches who have always said that your job is always either on the hook or there's new opportunities, and that they tell kids all the time, look, you better go somewhere because you like the university, not necessarily the coach. The coach better be the second thing you like about the university. And there's nothing wrong with that. Let's be honest. If you at least like the university, the coach is a second fiddle thing. Now, the new coach coming in might really rattle you the wrong way, and you may not stand him at all. And that might cause you to transfer later on. But if you like the university, it might be enough to get you to stick around and continue to play whatever sport it is that you're involved in. But a coaching job is always day to day, regardless of circumstance. And, it's not an uncommon thing. And I wish people would stop presenting stuff like that as news in order to maybe chastise Deion or whatever the case may be. People saying Deion went for higher ground. Look, man, he took money. Who cares? But even then, he gave himself a better opportunity. He's going to a major university, and I don't want to hear about what Deion was supposed to do for HBCUs. Look at what he has done for an HBCU. He's accomplished a lot over there, and those kids love him, and they responded to him in a positive way, and I don't feel like he left them high and dry. He was honest. Yes, Colorado has contacted me, so of other schools, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do yet, and it was the university who came out and named Deion Sanders as the coach. I felt that he was waiting on that announcement long before, to do it himself before anybody else was. But Colorado, I think more than anything, made a power play in order to make sure that they've solidified that Deion is going to go there. But that's what it amounts to. And they're going to be patient. Look, this is not something that Deion's going to be able to turn around in a season, 2 or 3. It's probably going to take 4 or 5 seasons for prime time to turn around the University of Colorado. The talent pool there is not going to be really D1 status level, if you ask me, to begin with. Number 2, anybody, and look, I've quoted people like Urban Meyer before who have won just about everywhere the man has gone, but, Urban Meyer said that, I don't get it, these are your kids, you coach them. And he can stand by that. Look what he did in Utah, look what he did when he went to Ohio State, convinced a bunch of kids that couldn't even play in a bowl game to go 12-0 anyway, and they weren't his. But I do think it's going to take a little bit of time for Deion. And regardless, they're going to have to let him have time to get this thing right. If they think he's going to be able to get this done in a year or 2, they may be sadly mistaken. But again, relying on that clout is what they are anticipating, and then Deion to coach from there. All right, let's get into the Philadelphia Eagles, Tennessee Titans. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this just because Philly, I think, did what a lot of people anticipated they were going to do. I've talked about Tennessee being a little overrated this season, but I felt that this team was good enough that at this point, Philly was finally going to play a team where you look at it and you go, okay, they've had some sort of challenge this season. And they won handily. They did what a lot of people thought they were going to do. I thought that maybe Derrick Henry could run the football on this Eagles defense. But regardless, Tannehill, I like him a lot. I think he's a really underappreciated quarterback. We've seen him do some things. Tennessee kind of showing who they are this season, and Philly reestablishing themselves as the premier team in the NFL right now. We'll see, obviously, what happens come playoff time, but they're the team to beat in the NFL. And I think that they're the best team in the NFL, and I think it's running away right now. And I know that a lot of you are going to like to argue the Kansas City Chiefs, but, man, they've lost some tough games this season. And obviously the big one was the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals came in. I felt that this is a game that they needed to win because really not a strong start to the season at all when it boiled down to it. But Joe Burrow and company has just shown this resilient nature, and it's a lot like last season. At least it feels like that, right? Last year, they start out pretty good, but then they go by the wayside, and they win and do just enough to be able to get into the playoffs. And from there, they just made a hell of a run. And right now, Burrow is owning Kansas City. And I know a lot of people are going to be talking about whether or not Kansas City should have gone for it. But let's not forget, at one point, Kansas City was down 14-3 in that football game. And then they made a tremendous comeback to where they even took the lead. But the forced fumble by the Cincinnati Bengals was a huge moment in that football game. And I think personally kicking the field goal was the right thing to do. Now, Mahomes wants to win, and I get it. And I don't have a problem if Andy Reid says, you know what, to hell with it, let's go for it. Okay? I don't have a problem with that. I think, though, the thing is, me personally, I think you tie the football game and you at least put yourself in a position of, if the Bengals are going to score, more than likely they're going to be going for a field goal. And if we hold them to a field goal, then we can drive down. I've got Patrick Mahomes. We can score a touchdown and win the game. And even if Cincinnati does end up scoring a touchdown, then I know that now I've got to do twice as much. So kicking the field goal was the right thing to do. Missed kick. Plenty of opportunities for Kansas City in that football game. Let's also not forget the goal line stand that the Chiefs made against the Bengals on 4th and 1. Cincinnati went for it themselves, and they could not convert. So let's not forget that Kansas City had plenty of opportunities. They had the lead at one point in that football game. They made a goal line stand, essentially, down in the red zone, close anyway. And Cincinnati unable to convert. So let's not forget that the Chiefs have their own set of chances to win that football game. I think if they kick the field goal and they tie there, it's not necessarily a big deal for Mahomes, but also look at it like this. If you're your coach and you see Mahomes is kind of hobbling around, do you really want to take a chance and go for it on 4th down and put him in even a worse situation and potentially something happens? I mean, that's your $500 million quarterback, literally, that we're talking about. So you've got to worry about more things than just winning football games sometimes. You got to worry about money, man. And Mahomes is a lot of money. And you know what? You live to play another day. And the good news is it's a regular season football game. And I know a lot of people are still very high on the Kansas City Chiefs. And of course, until somebody dethrones them in the AFC West, it's still theirs. But right now, the AFC West is the AFC West. You've got a hobbling Herbert. You've got McDaniels over there with the Raiders doing nothing. Denver lost again today. A missed field goal by McManus ended up being the key in that football game, believe that or not. And there's just no competition over there right now. Okay, so every game that Kansas City wins outside of the AFC West has to prove that they are the team that everybody says that they are. Mahomes is the player that everybody says that he is. But I don't know if Kansas City is the team that everybody says they are. They lost to the Bills already this season. Now they've lost to the Bengals already this season. They've had 2 very close football games against the Chargers, again with a hobbling Herbert. So what is your true impress level like when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs as a whole? Going the rest of the way, do you think that they are still the best team in the AFC? When, technically speaking, the best team from the AFC that's reigning right now is the Bengals, and they just beat the Chiefs. And Cincinnati is back to a well above 500 record at this point in the season. Like I said, really, really bad start to the year. That game against Pittsburgh was not a good look for either one of those teams. And Cincinnati started off horrendous this season. They really did. But they have since bounced back. Now, can you keep playing like this year in and year out? Obviously, no. Right now, it's working for Burrow and the Bengals. But I'm going to tell you something. This Kansas City football team, I don't think is as good as everybody suggests. I think offensively, there's no doubt that Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. I don't think that anybody should question that logically. You can't look yourself in the mirror and think to yourself, Mahomes isn't the best quarterback in the NFL. You could argue Josh Allen. I won't accept it, but I would allow you to argue it. But Mahomes is the best. Followed very closely to me by Joe Burrow, and then probably Josh Allen. But I don't think there's any question that Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. I'm just saying, do you really think the Chiefs are the best team? Look at the games that they are losing right now during the regular season. I know that they're tough games, but it doesn't vote well for you and your confidence going into the playoffs. And I think that's why Mahomes is frustrated. Yes, he wanted to go for it on 4th down, but I think he wants to win these types of games even in the regular season. And if I'm Mahomes, I'm probably just as frustrated because I'm thinking to myself, we're supposed to be the best team in the NFL. And we can't even beat teams right now that are first in their division. Where are the Bills sitting at? The Bengals are the best team in the NFC North. What's going on over there with Baltimore? Pittsburgh, are you kidding me? Cleveland? Come on. So when all is said and done, the Kansas City Chiefs can't beat the best team in an AFC division that's really not good, then on top of that, they can't even beat the second best team out of the AFC East right now. I'm asking you, what suggests that they are the best team in all of football? And you can't even say that they're, better than Philly, can you? Maybe schedule-wise, I would accept that argument. But the Eagles are doing what they're supposed to be doing. If you're the superior football team, you're supposed to be beating up on these teams. That's what they're doing. And there's a good possibility this season that 3 teams out of the NFC East, will make the playoffs. We could be looking at the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the Giants all in the playoffs. And it wouldn't be the first time something like that has ever happened. And that was with 6 teams in every conference. Now it's 7. So now we really have a possibility of 3 teams out of one division in a conference getting into the playoffs. It's a very strong possibility that Philly, Dallas, and New York, the Giants, I should be specific about that, could all end up in the playoffs. So again, I'm asking you, given what you've seen from the Chiefs this year, do you think that they are the best team in the AFC? I don't think so. I think the AFC is a wide open toss-up. I think the Dolphins are playing out of their mind. I think the Chiefs are playing good, but not great. I think that the Bengals are coming on strong right now, and the Bills are also hanging around in there in that discussion, even though they're second out of their division. At one point, they were third. Let's not forget that. So the fact of the matter is, while I love Mahomes, I'm just not sold on the Kansas City Chiefs this season. Hell of a game. I think, to me, it was game of the year. Better than the Vikings-Bills game. But I just love what the Eagles are doing right now. And Burrow and the Bengals, they don't give up, man. They just do not give up in games. They really don't. All right, everybody, I am Drew Duncan. This is Sync 57 Sports, the 57 Sports Show, where sports lives 365/7. Quick recap here. Good move for Deion Sanders. Good move for the University of Colorado. Again, they're going to be relying on that clout, hoping that Deion can bring guys in with NIL deals, his clout, etc., and then be able to coach them up from there. As far as the CFP goes, I still like Georgia. I think Georgia ends up playing against Michigan in the CFP. Again, Ohio State, though, to me, the best opportunity that anybody has because of their offensive prowess to beat Georgia. So I do anticipate that Georgia-Ohio State should be a pretty close football game. I think Michigan wins running away, against TCU. And then, of course, I think that if they have to play Georgia, same result as last year, they'll probably get obliterated. And then, of course, obviously, a couple of games to tap on. The Philadelphia Eagles did what they were supposed to do. They beat a team in Tennessee that I thought was going to be somewhat of a challenge for them. Ended up not being. Philly doing what they're supposed to be doing at this juncture. They're beating up on teams that just aren't up to their level. And they're proving why they have the best record in all the NFL right now. Kansas City, are you truly sold on them? Hell of a win by Burrow and the Bengals. You got to give them credit. They were up 14-3, and then they end up down, and they figure out a way to win that football game. And defensively, again, creating turnovers just at the right time. They're just so good at those things. And I really feel like Joe Burrow right now is in his zone. Something, we saw him struggle really bad at the beginning of the season. Horrible football. But, man, he has really come on. And this football team with Chase at wide receiver, I don't know if there's a better combination in the NFL than Chase and Burrow. I really don't. The Bengals are they know what to do. Those guys know each other, obviously, from their time at LSU. And you've got a coach that understands exactly how to use those two guys together. I'm telling you what, that's the best combination in the NFL. So there you go. All right, you guys, that was the show. Everybody, as always, stay safe and take care of yourselves.